wonder because, on this program and others, we've wrestled with trying to figure out the motive. And the motive, I thought for a while, I know I'm being too generous, that there was a grand strategy that he was going to unite the North, of the Russians and the American people and the Europeans against the South, the Islamic threat, which the Soviet Union worried about from the time of the Russian Revolution, their soft underbelly, that there was some greatness in this, something about Syria, Israel, and Iran, that he was going to put it all together. And I guess there's no evidence of that kind of forethought. And then you go to the Dacio theory. It's all personal CYA saving his own situation. And then you go to something in the middle. They have something on him from something else. Where's your mind on why he is behaving in such a corrupt fashion to be supporting a foe of this country down the line to the point of talking about letting them interrogate our people, KGB types, talking about inviting them here to the White House on top of all of this, and seeming to be in a total state of forgiveness? What do you make of this?
Well, as I say, I think he has minimal regard for and minimal understanding of the rules of American government and the institutional facts of American government. Remember, Chris, that during one of the presidential debates among the Republican candidates, when Mr. Trump, for some reason, felt called upon to defend the conservatism of his sister, who's a federal judge, he says she has signed some of the same bills that Justice Alito has signed. He thinks judges sign bills. So he has, I mean, we have a president who would flunk a 6th grade civics exam. So he doesn't quite understand the limits on presidential power and the limits imposed not by de jure matters, but by norms. So again, the people around Putin figured out how to spread another day or two of chaos. It's like throwing a puppy into a kindergarten class.
Well, that's a nice picture. Let's bring in Ruth Marcus, Deputy Editorial Page Editor for The Washington Post. Ruth, I'd love your thoughts. Same question, big question, because historians are going to be wondering at that. Maybe they'll get a clue. Maybe there'll be some smoking gun, a Perry Mason moment or something where somebody admits it all. But we're still trying to figure out, why would a president throw away our sovereignty?
Well, I actually go back to our friend Ben Wittes's trademark phrase, malevolence layered with incompetence. And I think what we've seen this week is some combination of the two of them. I could not agree with George Moore, which I guess is turning us all into his form of conservatives these days on the rock bottom front, about the ignorance and naivete and lack of experience that's been on display this week, and that as a piece of the explanation for what's going on. When Putin says to you, like the sort of KGB agent version of a used car salesman, hey, guy, I've got a great deal for you, so here's how it's going to work. We interview your guys, and they interview, you interview our guys. If you have zero understanding of government, maybe that sounds like a good deal. If you have any understanding of government, it's a mess. And the thing that was amazing isn't simply that the president snapped at it and called it an incredible deal, but that it took multiple hours and this bizarro news press briefing that we had yesterday from Sarah Huckabee Sanders, where she laid it out there, left it open as a possibility, to say, no, we're not doing that.
Well, George, you're, an historic conservative. I mean, you've known the whole history of the conservative movement, going back through Buckley, back through Goldwater, back to Taft. There was something there called, as I recall, the Connolly Reservation, which we sure will join these international organizations, but nobody's going to take us from anywhere outside the United States to justice. No American's going to be brought before some tribunal. And here's Trump letting this out, that we might actually let our people, including our top State Department officials, be facing Russian justice under a KGB colonel. Your thoughts? How did this escape from the Republican or the conservative philosophy that we look out for our own?
Well, what Mr. Putin was doing was cleverly insinuating from yet another direction the problem of moral equivalence. He said, well, you have Mr. Mueller, and he has due process, as you people understand it, and he has to go through courts, and he has to get indictments and grand juries and all the rest. And we have our own understanding, which is our legal system does what I tell it to do. But they're both essentially the same. It does seem to me that he has succeeded in causing a kind of chaos.
Well, the White House received swift and widespread condemnation for refusing to deny Putin's request outright, and some of that criticism came from the president's own allies. Let's listen.
In general, would you ever envision a world in which you would allow suspects to be interviewed by Russia?
Well, I never want to say never about anything, but it's certainly not high on our list of investigative techniques.
It's galling, really, because having seen the evidence, especially that I've seen, there's no investigative benefit to that.
No, I cannot imagine any circumstances under which that would happen. It would be disastrous and absurd, and there's no way he would do that. Why would he? I mean, you don't give our own people over to foreign governments. You just don't do that, and he would never do it, ever.
Well, the president's former campaign rivals also weighed in. Hillary Clinton tweeted, "Ambassador McFaul is a patriot who has spent his career standing up for America. To see the White House even hesitate to defend a diplomat is deeply troubling." Former Florida Governor Jeb Bush tweeted, "Not dismissing this absurd request out of hand is an extraordinary sign of weakness by an American president." George, it seems to me we do have some history in turning people over to rather difficult or actually frightening governments, where in some cases it was somewhere in Eastern Europe or it was somewhere in South Asia. If we had a difficult prisoner from the war with terrorism, that we might turn over a prisoner to one of those governments because they weren't as they weren't as dainty as we are. What do you think of that? That's a hell of a reference point for this thing.
It is, and it's a national embarrassment that we, in fact, did some of those things. But I think the secret of Mr. Trump's behavior is that he really believes that international relations is conducted between people who become friends. And he thinks that in some sense, Mr. Putin is or can be made into a friend of his. You asked about the conservative pedigree of some of the criticism of him. A good conservative, the 19th century British Foreign Secretary and I guess Prime Minister Lord Palmerston said, "Nations have no permanent friends, only permanent interests." And it's the confusion of friendship with interest here that is perhaps most dismaying.
Hey there, I'm Chris Hayes from MSNBC. Thanks for watching MSNBC on YouTube. If you want to keep up to date with the videos we're putting out, you can click subscribe just below me or click over on this list to see lots of other great videos.